week 5 of DMD 320, Application and Mobile Design. Hope you're doing well, working hard, and being safe. All right, what are we doing here in week 5? Let's take a look at our 5th module. See what's going on this week. Go to the week 5 overview. All right, so this week, couple of things. We are moving along quickly with our first project. We've already gone through our research and ideation process. We have gone through our design setup. We have identified our client. We've written about our client and their intended audience. And of course, you've worked on your mood board. So those are deliverables 1 and 2. So we're going to spend some time in class this week reviewing these, having a discussion about them, answering a bunch of questions. So we will do that in class, right? But for now, we're going to start considering the next 2 deliverables, which are deliverable 3 and deliverable 4. So you've got to get rolling on deliverable 3. You probably have already started it, which is the wireframe part of the project, and we're going to take a closer look at that in a minute. And then for homework, you're going to get rolling on deliverable 4, which is the design phase. So we're going to talk about how you transition from the mood board to the wireframes to the design phase in a second, okay? So we'll get to that in 1 second, but that's where we're at. So that's our main goal today, is the wireframe and the design process. Okay, you do have some reading to do this week under media. There is an article, Mobile versus Desktop Internet Usage for 2020. This is from Broadband Search, which is a good sort of data analytics company with regard to this sort of stuff. And it talks about the idea of mobile internet access versus desktop internet access as of now, basically, the most latest data. And so it shows a whole bunch of information. It's a pretty short article, but there's some great infographics. I love this one. Basically shows that in the last 7 years, mobile traffic, meaning the amount of people who have been getting on the internet through some kind of mobile device, usually a smartphone or a tablet, has gone up 222%, which is kind of bananas if you think about it. You can see in 2013, only 16% of the world population that has access to the internet in some form was accessing it on a mobile device. Meanwhile, at the end of 2019, it was up to 53%. That is a huge jump. And we talked about this in class last week, that there is a mobile-first mentality that has developed amongst people who access the internet, right? So just to put this in clear perspective here, not the entire world has access to the internet. Most of the world has access to the internet, but it's not 100%. In fact, it's not even 80%. So if we just look at the parts of the world that has access to the internet, then the next question is, how many of those people are accessing the internet by sitting down at a computer, and a desktop computer, okay? And that can also be considered the same as from a laptop computer. That falls under the category as well. So if you're sitting at a traditional computer accessing the internet, and then of course people who have access to it from some kind of a mobile device, which could be either an Android or an Apple smartphone, or it could be a tablet of some kind. Those are the mobile devices. And so as you can see, the usage of mobile devices as a means by which to access the internet has gone up exponentially, and it's heading in that direction. And so from a designer's point of view, from a content designer's point of view, we will very soon, if not now, be designing our content with a mobile first point of view, meaning everything we design should be mobile friendly first, should either be a responsive website, should be a mobile app first, and then we worry about the desktop traffic, because from an audience point of view, you always want to serve your greatest audience first, right? Your largest audience first. And as you can see by these statistics, mobile is the way to go. Now, that doesn't mean that we abandon desktop websites or desktop internet experiences. It just means that we should be designing in a way that puts that mobile experience in the forefront. So anyway, read through this article. This is your sort of textbook reading for the week. There's a variety of good information in here, and I really like the infographics that they're using. They're a lot of fun. Okay, so back to our week 5 overview. So once you've read through that, let's take a look at our example site over here in XD, okay? So, of course, this is the sample site that you guys have, the Project 1 example, and by now, of course, you have completed your mood board, right? You identified photographs that are indicative of the type of imagery you're going to use in your mobile app, and it could be graphics, could be illustrations, could be photography, could be a combination thereof, but you've identified them. In addition to your mood board, you should also have a folder full of the imagery that you're actually going to use in your mobile app. Make sure that through your research you have collected all the imagery you're going to use, okay? All the photographs, all the graphics, all the illustrations, whatever. You have the color palette that you've settled upon, which you have drawn some of those colors from your photographs. And of course you have the fonts that you've settled on, represented here in 4 different ways: as a heading, as a subheading, as a list, and as paragraph or body copy. So make sure that you have that in there too. And of course the collection of icons that you are going to use in your app. So make sure you've got all these things not only just in your mood board, but also in your project folder, so you know the fonts you're going to use. You've got everything ready to rock and roll, okay? All right. And then of course before that you did your profile, right? Where you have your company profile, your target audience, and maybe you're working on that extra credit part of the project where you're making a mobile app icon. But maybe you are, maybe you're not. But either way, you can. So now we are going to move into wireframes. Now this is the part of the project where we're actually going to keep reusing some of the same elements. But before we get into this in XD, let's sort of go over it in the project again. So here we are in the project handout. And the first thing you really need to be aware of is sort of which screens are we designing. We're not designing the entire mobile app. We don't have time for that. Not to mention the fact, in a prototype situation in the real world, you would never design the entire app. You are essentially designing a prototype as a proof of concept. And what that means, of course, is that you are going to design it in a way that proves to your boss, to the client, to the developer you're working with, that this is what you would like to design to solve the problem that is in front of us, right? And so they will either approve or not approve the project based on this demonstration. You wouldn't ever design the entire app before you would get approval to move forward. So as a prototype, just a handful of screens is the way to go, right? So for this particular project, we're going to be designing 4 screens, okay? You absolutely have to design the home page, also referred to as the launch page on a mobile app, meaning it's the first screen that the person sees, that your audience sees when they are accessing the mobile app, okay? The other 3 screens are entirely up to you. So go back to your client's desktop website to sort of decide what other screens you think you would need. You've already analyzed their desktop website. You already get to know their business a little bit. So you don't necessarily have to do a one-to-one translation of a page that exists on their desktop website and turn it into a mobile page, but you can use those pages as inspiration. Or you could do a one-to-one translation. It's entirely up to you, but just don't feel that you have to. So 4 screens total: the home page, the launch page, and then whatever other 3 that you think will be essential to really show what you need to do in this mobile app, okay? Now, note that we are designing for the iPhone 10, the XS, or the 11 Pro format in Adobe XD. So when you're choosing your screen sizes from XD, you can, of course, make sure that you choose those from the options, okay? We want the right size and shape. So you're going to do this right below your mood board, right? If you're working in a vertical format for your presentation, or to the right of your mood board if you're working in a horizontal presentation. In our example, we're working vertically. And you're going to lay out 4 screens horizontally. So you're literally going to draw in or copy-paste 4 screens in the appropriate iPhone format. So just 4 rectangles, boom, 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 boom. And then once you have those in, then you can start wireframing, right? And we'll get back to the XD file in a minute, but I want to finish reading through what the requirements are. So of course, using those blank screens that you've just made, you're going to be creating simple black, white, and gray wireframes. Now these are a little different looking than the paper wireframes that we've done in previous classes, right? First of all, we're doing these digitally. Obviously, we're not doing them on paper. Now maybe you printed out the paper wireframe sheet that is in your resources folder, and you have been doing some paper wireframes for yourself just to work out some ideas. That's great. I would certainly encourage you to do that, and then of course you can reference those before you build these digital wireframes in XD. But here we're going to build them, of course, digitally right in XD, okay? And we're not going to be using just empty boxes. We're going to be using filled in boxes using gray, black, whatever you need. But again, no color here, just black, white, and gray. I realize in the examples there's a couple of colors. Just ignore them. We're just doing black, white, and gray right now. We'll worry about color later, okay? And so you're going to put in the shapes that you need just to sort of show where the major page elements will live. This gives you a chance to kind of plot out the space. You might want to start by loosely sketching a number of options by hand, like I said, on paper, before you commit to doing them in XD, okay? Make sure, maybe even before you get started on this, to add the iOS status bar and home indicator to each screen. That's this section up at the top here that has the time, the cellular indicator, the Wi-Fi indicator, and the battery life indicator, and you can find that in the icons that I gave you in the resources folder. So you just literally copy paste them, size them properly, and stick them in there, okay? So those are found in the class resources. And so from there, you're just going to draw out what you need. Now let's go back into XD here, and we'll see what we got. So you'll see here in these wireframe examples that a couple of things are happening, right? For one thing, don't forget guides, okay? So these blue guides can be dragged in from the outside. So let me get rid of this one. And you'll notice that in XD now that when you hover over the edge of an artboard, right, you can simply get that little gray bar that pops up and you get this double-sided arrow. That allows you to click and drag out a guideline, which you can put in, and it will snap to various points, right? And so you want to put it in so that it is just at the right spot so that you have enough space to keep your important items inside the guidelines, right? You want to make sure that those go in first, so drag those in. Now this is not to say that you won't have elements that go outside the guidelines, of course, like for instance this rectangle here, which is going to house a photograph, obviously bleeds right off the edge of the screen, but the guidelines are so that you don't put typographic elements or elements that you want to make sure that people see inside the guidelines, okay? Because even though the screen size is appropriate for the iPhone, sometimes things get covered or squished or whatever, so you want to stay within the guides, okay? So once you've done that, you then can move on and start adding in these elements. Now you're just going to use basic tools, right? Like rectangles. So here in my room combination page, if I wanted to show a picture for a living room, and maybe I wanted to traverse the entire screen, I can simply drag out a rectangle and drop that into place and then resize it to make sure that it just hits the edge of the screen. Remember, use your smart guides. Look for those magenta smart guides that pop up that sort of let you know where you are. And then let's say that that is going to be my living room photo, right? And maybe I want it to be a little more narrow because I want to stack a couple of them to show my room combination, right? In this particular example. And I want to move it up a little bit, so I'm going to use my arrow keys to knock it up a little bit. And then once I've gone ahead and done that, I am going to fill it with a particular color. And so I can do that by choosing, I have colors over here that I've already assigned, or of course you can grab them from your color palette up here and add them to your color palette. Either way, you can go over to fill here and choose a color, or you can simply go over here to your assets, which you've already assigned from your mood board, and just go ahead and pick that color. So now my rectangle is colored in gray. Go back to my selection arrow. And I have that there. Now I want to get rid of the stroke because I don't want to have a line around this, so I can just uncheck stroke, or border I should say. And now I've got that. So that's where that photo is going to live. So that's sort of the extent of the wireframing. Now, of course, if I want to have another photo below it, I can simply do the old option drag technique, right? And again, use those magenta guides to space things out evenly. So I want to make sure it's the same as that. So now I've got two places for photographs to live here, which is pretty great. Now, of course, once you choose something, you can go ahead and group them together if you want to. You can add text on top of it. But, you know, in your planning stage, you know that, hey, I'm going to put some photographs in there, and you can sort of do that as you are going along, right? Now, if I wanted it to have rounded edges, right? If I didn't want it to bleed off the edge, and sort of like these examples, I want them to be rounded, well, I can choose both of these. I can shrink them down a little bit just by dragging them inwards, right? And then if I want, I can pull them in a little bit and add a round corner to it, which of course I can adjust over here and make it the appropriate size that I want. I just want it to be 10 on the radius, and then go from there, get rid of that one, click, drag, duplicate, and I'm ready to go. So you decide how you want it to go. But in the wireframing stage here, we're not putting in so little information that it's unrecognizable, right? We're not putting in fake text necessarily. We're not putting in just boxes with X's through them. Those are the ways we would do it on paper. Here we're doing a little more planning and designing here. So in this example, you'll see that, the company logo is already put in there. The names of things are not in, but it just says name, so we know where we're going to put it. Some temporary prices are put in, right? So you can go ahead and change those later. Slide bars are drawn in. So a lot of the details are in there, but not the whole boat. Now, if an individual screen, of course, is just going to fill the size and shape of the screen as is, but remember, if you want it to scroll, you can, of course, simply choose the artboard and drag it down, right? And make it longer than it needs to be. And that'll give you some scroll area underneath the dotted line, just like that one has. And of course, you can do that for any of your artboards, right? So feel free to do that. So let's get rid of the extra artboard here, and we'll demonstrate it over here. So let's say I've decided that the category section should scroll. You can simply click that artboard, and like I just showed you, you can just drag it down and make it scroll if you want. Or, of course, if you, in your planning stage, you've made something scroll and you decided, I want it to be just a stationary page, you can simply eliminate the items that were there, move this back up, and then sort of go back to the title and put it back there, and now it's no longer a scrolling page. Now, the main part of doing the wireframes now is not to get it right the first time, right? We want to be able to play around with the wireframes until we're totally happy with it. So don't be in a big rush to finish the wireframes. You want to make duplicates of them if you want, and then try different options. Move things around. Try your wireframes a different way. And do this as many times as you need to until you're totally happy with not only the look of each individual screen, but the flow from screen to screen to screen, okay? So this is sort of a play state with the wireframes. Don't feel like you're locked down into it, okay? Okay, so next, we will get to the design stage, and we're going to dive into that a little later. We'll talk about how to convert your wireframes from wireframes to design, and we'll sort of demonstrate how that works. But obviously, you're going to start by duplicating your final wireframes and moving them down to the design section. But anyway, we'll get into the rest of that later. All right, so finish up your wireframes, get rolling on that, make sure that they are exactly the way you want them, and then we will dive into the design stage later on for homework. So this week, wireframes. Get those puppies done. All right, hope you guys are doing good. I will talk to you soon.